information coming through, and I was kind of actually shocked with some of my comments from my last video when I started talking about the news and Trump, and I got some comments saying that, oh, you're a Q supporter and all this, and so much hate, and I'm just kind of getting tired of people judging other people. You know, the whole thing about being an awakened person is you look at everything. And this whole thing about, oh, you know, we don't want to be on this timeline or that timeline or Trump controlling one. The point is, I'm researching everything. I don't have hate with any religion. I don't have any hate with either political side. I just look at it all, okay? Trump is downloading and offering a lot of symbolism for freedom and spirituality, which people are not seeing because of the media providing so much hate. But I do think in the end, anybody on either pillar is not going to fare well, because I do think in the end they're going to take Trump out, and this will shock a lot of people, okay, and put a lot of people into mourning. So when people assume that I'm one or the other, all I want to see is that we're being shown how to free ourselves. I'm not looking for any savior, and I don't appreciate kind of judgment to say that I'm not a, you know, my channel is like doing the wrong thing now or whatever. I don't know what everybody expects of me, that I'm not supposed to talk about political sides because I'm on the middle path, but we have to talk about it because that's where all the clues are and all the breadcrumbs are. They're coming from both sides. Okay, so I just wanted to say that. Anything that I'm speaking off the top of my head again, you need to go back and look at old videos, okay? Because everything is documented on my channel. I don't just make up stuff and talk about it. Okay, so anybody new to the channel, just go back and look at my old stuff. Now, I have done videos all about the Mobius strip, the Meissner effect, and the Cheshire charge, on how you activate your DNA. Basically, your protein in the Meissner effect does a rotation with the negative and positive that creates like a pearl nacre kind of layering of protein that creates your pearl body. So it all ties into the pearl as being a superconductor, okay? And the Cheshire charge is kind of like able for you to jump the Mobius strip, kind of get through the veil on the other side of the wall, and then, you know, you're really able to kind of time travel, okay? And this is all to do with quantum physics. Now, when I went on YouTube, I forgot to do this, but I just Googled, you know, put Mobius strip into YouTube, and this clip came up from the Avenger movie, The Endgame, and, you know, lo and behold, he's mastering time travel, and he's got this computer program in his living room, and he's saying, this is the Mobius strip, and, you know, I've mastered time travel. So I'm starting to think that everybody's like, I don't want to be on the Trump line or the whatever. The point is, I think when you go into Ascension, you're able to jump into parallel universes at all different points in the timeline, okay? Because time is not what we think it is. Time is not linear. It's circular. That's why everything's repeating. Like that's why I do a lot of my research is going back into history and seeing what's happened on the same day, because it just reloops. Okay, we're just relooping history all the time. This is what this realm is. It's not linear. Okay. The other thing I wanted to talk about was that you know, thinking that you're just going into this lovely garden, if that's where you're ascending to. I don't think it's that. I think it's like you're able to kind of jump in and out of time, and that you might need to block two worlds to help one reality. Okay, so that maybe you're a warrior going in and out of the veil to help the reality here, to help free people. I don't know. Like, I'm just assuming from what they're showing us in fiction. Okay, so this is the whole part of expanding your mind, is you have to see the fiction as interchangeable with reality, with facts. Okay, so you know, so factual, fictional, interchangeable. Okay, so this is how you start to awaken, as you start to see this is that the real dream is our reality. And I know that's way out there for some people thinking, oh, time travel now, but I really do think that they know the future. They wouldn't have had Baron Trump's Underground Adventure book written in 18 whatever, Ingersoll, all these things, and Simpsons popping up, knowing the future. Like, obviously, you can start to get your mind around they know the future. Okay, so there's a way to jump in and out of these realities. Okay, so here we have the history of Groundhog Day. It ties into Candlemas, be fair and bright, come winter, have another flight. In Candlemas brings clouds of rain, go winter and come not again. So the whole thing, that it's not just a coincidence that Groundhog Day is on February 2nd, which is Candlemas, which is like the purification, and it's in the month of February, which is the month of purification. Okay, so this is a kind of like a religious holiday to do with the candles on the tree, and the light of man. And they're showing us that this holiday is a little bit connected to this festival. Okay, so you wouldn't think that because nobody really tells you that. They're just like, oh, it's just about the weather. The groundhog is like a tradition for the weather. But oh no, it ties back to Candlemas. Now, the German tradition, it was a hedgehog, but because there was none here, they decided to use a groundhog. So they started in 1886, some say 1887, but and they go up to this place outside the village called Gobbler Knob. Kind of reminds me of turkeys and the whole pardoning the turkeys. And this is part of the tradition, and lots of people go there. Like there's thousands of people that go there to watch this groundhog. Now they had a musical called The Groundhog Day in New York. This came out in March 16th. And all these guys that are the current members, they're called the Inner Circle. There's 15 of them. They all have different kind of funny names. And when I started learning about the history of the Plantagenist kings that were in France and England, these family of these ancient kings, they had barons actually come up against them, and these barons all had these kind of funny names like Moonshine and Big Chill. They all had these weird names, and the barons were like the keepers of the locals, and they eventually ended up fighting the kings, okay, to try to get control, because the kings were not rational. They just did really crazy things to the normal people. So anyhow, this is all, I think, where the tradition comes from, with these funny little names from way, way, way back. So being called the Inner Circle, and they're all men. They say, women can join, but nobody ever has. I listened to an interview with them. It's like they're kind of like a little secret society. It's very much like kind of like a Freemason, but they're trying to pretend it's not. But what was interesting in the interview, they were talking about the celebration that they do, I think, before the event. And they all get together, and they have like, you can be part of these members, and you can go and have hors d'oeuvres and have like kind of like a meeting with the groundhog. Okay, so what they said was this groundhog gets an elixir every single time, and it adds on 7 years to his life, so he's immortal. Okay, so he's immortal because he's supposed to be 130 years old, and it's supposed to be the same groundhog, and that he never dies. So we're talking about the nectar of the gods, which is Lyn in Wales, in Welsh, the pond, and this all ties into Lincoln being the nectar of the gods again. So they're talking about this as elixir. So there you go. It's always about the immortality, and I just find it really interesting that this is the last day of Christmas, February 2nd, the Candlemas, and it has to do with purification. I learned this by watching this documentary by BBC, all about these kings, and I didn't realize that the kings were actually from France originally, from Anjou, and then there was a Duke of Anjou, and he ended up marrying William the Conqueror's daughter from England, but it was all the kings were originally French speaking, and the peasants spoke English because they invaded England, because she was the heir to the England because of William the Conqueror descendants. So it was interesting. This documentary was explaining that there was constantly battling, and then the French started to get in wars with their king, because then they were now ruling England, and then the French king didn't like them, and so that was King Louis. And this is where it all goes back to the Battle of Lincoln. Okay, and it always goes back to Lincoln, right? This painting of the stained glass window, sorry, was actually to do with these Plantagenet kings that decided to get away from King Louis, and this is the most famous ancient stained glass window. And I just thought it was interesting because they have themselves at the bottom, portrait with their family, and they have Jesus hanging upside down on the cross, which is just like Odin, right? So I'm kind of like, whoa, that's really bizarre. Go watch the documentary. It's interesting. It's a few hours long. I think there's a few parts to it, but I found it really educational about the barons and how they had to fight for their rights. Now, this all ties in to the Magna Carta, okay, which is the Great Charter of Freedoms. And this is what the Constitution of the United States is based on. And it had to do with this English Civil War. So it always goes back to the Civil War. And yeah, so they ended up the First Baron War. And this was actually written in 1215, so 806 years ago. And it is in the library of Lincoln Castle right now. And this is a very important document. It's all based on freedom, but in this documentary that I was listening to, they said they ended up doing this, and then the guy that did it ended up getting his head chopped off later on because the kings just despised the people for trying to create freedoms for themselves. So it was a really contentious document, and at the beginning nobody wanted to follow it. The kings didn't want to follow it, but the barons had to fight. And this was the famous baron that ended up fighting it. And this is the war 2 years later, because the kings didn't want this charter to be passed. So then they had this big war, again called the Battle of Lincoln. So that was in 1217, but previous in 1141, February 2nd, okay, so we got the 2-2, the February 2nd again, the Candlemas, the Groundhog Day, was the original Battle of Lincoln. And this was all to do with Welsh, and that they ended up fighting the English, Plantagenet kings, and because they could never get into Wales to fight them. And so eventually they had this, war with the Welsh kings. And then later on, they ended up getting their heads chopped off, the Welsh kings, and they eventually, took them out. So, but this is it's really important history. This all is tying into America, okay? Because they're using the same symbolism and also the same numbers and the dates. So this all ties into some books called The Battle is featured in the historical novel The Pillars of Earth. And it's always about the pillars, right? Also, When Christ and His Saints Slept. Okay, so it was not, it was really against the small people, and these kings came in and, they wiped out all the British, all the Welsh people, and, they genocided the Welsh language. What's interesting about the Welsh language, it goes back to being able to decode the cuneiforms on the Egyptian cuneiforms. And also, I do think it has a sound frequency that heals the body. That's why the whole language was genocided. And, then we have the Mandan Indians in the United States that were speaking Welsh when the founding fathers were coming over to America. So the Welsh language is very important, and there's always been this kind of war. But what's fascinating is the kings were actually French. They weren't even English. They were French, and eventually they learned English over hundreds and hundreds of years later. But the kings were French, and then they were kind of like fighting between the lands of England and then keeping their lands in France, and then they lost their lands in France because they weren't there, and then they ended up fighting for the English land, and then eventually over time they ended up speaking English. It's just fascinating. Like, who would have thought? But it's the French, right? So this just kind of boggled my mind. I had no idea. So I want to thank all you guys for sending me stuff. Somebody noticed this with Pelosi, that she had mentioned about Lincoln, and I think she had a Lincoln pin on as well, and she also talked about the temple, which is all tied into the Bible. the abomination of desolation. And so she's saying this in here, a bit of a quote with the temple. And then she brings up Lincoln again, President Abraham Lincoln. She had the coat the night he was assassinated. The speaker explained the same message was embroidered on former Abraham Lincoln, the Lincoln Party. Lincoln message, one country, one destiny, says Pelosi. Okay, so now we got Lincoln tied to February 2nd. So Groundhog Day, here he has his hands on 10 and 1. So we've got the pillars again. So the official release of the theatrical release of Groundhog Day was 1993 on February 11. So we got the 11, we got the 2. So we're getting the 22 again. Remember, there's 22 cards in the Trump tarot cards. I bet you never would have thought Groundhog Day was the most spiritual movie of our time. But here they have the release as February 12th. So they're keeping the pillars, but they're keeping the 2 too. So let's go check out what was in the sky. Oh, and the grid is aligning at 5:30 at night to Trump's grid, which is the, Medusa head and the wolf, where when Trump was born. That's where everything, that azimuthal grid was aligned to. And I think this guy was saying it's one of the last movies that had the old Columbia tri-star logo. So the tri-star, I thought it was interesting. It goes back to the Trinity. And then, of course, you have Pegasus, which ties into, the white horse, freedom. Also, the Library of Congress put it into their library in 2006. Somebody else actually calculated this in an article here saying how many times he, had to relive the day, and it was actually 33 years. No coincidence. And then 414 days is mentioned in the movie. And the mammoth 11,931 days he spent learning. So I thought it was interesting, the 33, right? Because it's the Freemason number. They're also coming out with the second release for Groundhog 2, February 2nd this year. So I wanted to look in advance past this February 2nd date because it's probably coded. I was thinking about it afterwards. It would be too obvious if they did something then, because it would be, people would see that it's a religious holiday. So I was like, oh, wow, I wonder if they go forward. If you go to the Ides of March, which is when they killed Julius Caesar, which is March 15th, it comes to 42 days. So I wanted to look into the sky to see what was going on in March. And I came up with some, I was kind of shocked what was in the sky actually, all in the middle of March. So here, Julius Caesar was killed in 44 BC. Now we know in Gematria 44 means death. So that's a number I want you to keep in your head, the number 44. We also have Trump as 45. We have to keep the 22 in there as well. So we've got all these numbers that we've got to kind of keep in our forefront of our minds. And of course, the number 33. So February 2nd is the 33rd day of the year. So we got the 33. We also have the 44th day of winter. And Groundhog Day, yeah, I'd shown you guys this before, but I just want to go over it again. The number 222 is a strobogrammatic number, meaning that it looks the same when you turn it upside down on a digital calculator. So 222 is a rotational symmetric number. So let's go figure out what that is. Such as a palindrome number. Now, Ivanka Trump did a tweet, I guess, I can't remember when it was in the winter, maybe last year or in the fall. She also tweeted about a palindrome numbers. So she, was dropping crumbs. So this symbol, this Euclidean space symbol that is a triskelion, all ties into the Odin symbol that was tattooed on Jake Jelly that ended up showing up at the rally and the protest and, looked like Odin. Okay, so it all ties in to this symbol, this ancient symbol. And he also had the Tree of Life tattooed on him and Thor's hammer on his stomach. And then he ends up having all these videos. His name is Yellowstone Wolf. Okay, so the wolf again, like Trump. And Yellowstone has to do with the yellow brick road. It also has to do with Yellowstone Park. There's actually really bizarre triangle around that. I did a video on it a long time ago that all has nuclear plants around it. There's 3 of them in a triangle. So I don't know if they're going to blow Yellowstone. I'm not sure. But anyhow, the whole point of it is that he was disclosing time travel tech through Space Force. So back to the time travel. Somebody mentioned to me that he was in jail and he was refusing to eat because he was hungry, and that all ties into Odin. I haven't checked all that out, but I'll just thought I'd let you guys know and share that with you. So the Isle of Man is off the coast of Wales, and there's a town up there that is where the British ended up taking them out because it was their Anglesey. And this flag has the symbol again with the three legs, that all ties into this rotational number, which is really interesting. And it goes back to this king called Magnus the Third, King of Norway. So it's the Manin. So we got back to the Maga, the Magan, and this is way, way, way before the Magna Charter. Okay, so it's really interesting how they just keep relooping the terminology or the names. So this is the original symbol going back to the Hellenistic period, and it ties into Dionysus, which is, you know, the one that wants to free you. 382 BC. This is how far back it goes. And here's the name called the tree Cassin, okay, which is the three legs, which is all tying into that Alaman flag. So the Triskelion. So this is interesting that it's like, this is a really ancient symbol. I'm really starting to think this symbol has to do with wormholes and time travel. Okay, so this tree Cassin Valen. Valen means like man. And then on this island of Alan Man, it ends up going back to the Lord of Man, is the etymology of Manin. I had to dig for this one. Very hard to find information on this three-legged. It's one of the oldest symbols known to mankind. The earliest representation of it was found in prehistoric rock carvings in northern Italy. It appears on Greek vases and coins from the 6th and 8th century BC, and was revered by Norse and Sicilian people. The Sicilian version has a representation of the head of Medusa in the center. That's where the Trump's grid is, right? Is on the Medusa, and that's where it was all lined on the protests. The Manx people believe that the Triskelion came from Scandinavia. According to the Norse mythology, the Triskelion was a symbol of the movement of the sun through the heavens. It was derived from a design which showed the spokes of a wheel and which it turned, representing the rays of the sun. Because of this, it had described as a solar wheel, a symbol of pagan and sun worship. Related symbols are the cross and the Philfot, which all ties into Odin, right? The Philfot position of his legs, the hangman on the tree of life on the tarot cards, is his legs is in the Philfot. So they're also saying it ties into the swastika, but the swastika is always 4, not 3. But it's probably all the same. Maybe this one's the moon. They're saying sun, but who knows? Triple is always the moon, right? So it goes back to Norse, and then dates from around 10th century AD. They're saying it's like a triple symbol, but it's also solar. And then they're saying, well, maybe it's the elements water, air, and fire, and earth being at the center. So the Manx are from the Isle of Man. Let's see, and they're saying that they could loathe the fact that it wasn't really the original place that it came from. It came from Sicilian, also had this symbol. So, and it ties in, it says, okay, this is interesting. Okay, so the Sicilian legs were also naked and often had the head of Medusa at the center point. They usually had wings attached to the heels, and this would link them to the god Mercury or Hermes, right? Yeah, so it's also Perseus has, little wings on his feet. So the Manx legs are normally encased in armor and have spurs on their heels. So, it's Perseus that has the head of Medusa. Okay, and he's freeing Andromeda, who's the chained woman, which all ties into the Statue of Liberty, right? So it's like freedom, right? So the Medusa head, you think, oh, it's the evil eye, but it's really, you have it as your shield, so you turn everything to stone that's attacking you or whatever. The connection with the Sicilian probably comes about through the Norse occupation of the Isle of Man from about 979 to 1265. The Vikings sailed throughout the Mediterranean Sea and knew Sicily well, and was probably there, these seafarers who brought the emblem to the northern and western parts of Europe. So yeah, and then the Scottish kings had it. So anyhow, it does tie into the swastika and the filthot. So this is all tying back to Odin and Mercury and Hermes. Odin is Mercury. Yeah, it's the tree of life. So this symbol represents the tree of life. And I guess that's why they call it the tree of Cassin. So it's like that's all to do with the tree again, tree of life. They don't want to say it though. And again, the Ordic rite, which is a swastika, all ties into Odin again. So this is the filthot. And you know how the tree of life, Sigillaria, for the Sigillaria day, last day of Saturnalia, all tied into phosphorus. But when I Googled the word Cassin, it came up, it changed it, the Welsh name, to this, to the English version of it. And it has to do with phosphorus protein that's in milk, in sheep, humans, and buffalo. So, I got back to the phosphorus again. It just constantly relinks back to the tree of life, phosphorus. And then when I was talking about this, my last video, I had something up in the description box. Somebody watched it and they saw the symbols on the stage. There it is. I don't know what stage this is, as if it's in Hollywood, but they're using the symbols. Here they're actually saying that it's a triple goddess symbol in The Walking Dead. So they do go back to being the moon, the triple goddess. So, but the German Netflix series Dark, it symbolizes the caves, closed time loops, with each loop being 33 years apart, with the past affecting the future and the future influencing the past. So it has to do, and then it comes to this Sic Mundus. There's a symbol on the cave metal door and the emerald tablets. If you guys haven't read the emerald tablets, I would do so. It's as above, so below, but you should read it. This is an ancient symbol value for time travelers. There you go. They tell you that right in the Netflix show. It's about time traveling. That's what this whole symbol is all about. It's like, I think it's like wormholes. It's like spinning. And they mentioned in here the Sic Mundus. It's almost like the Axis Mundi tree, which means the tree of life. But this is called Sic Mundus, so was the world created. This is in the Emerald Tablets. Somebody brought this to my attention, that the Operation Warp Speed is actually this anti-Karana symbol. And so it's kind of funny. It's also like the triple leg symbol, right? But it's on a cube now. And this is what Trump used for his Operation Warp Speed. This YouTube channel, I think it's called Enter the Stars. He did something he found it, like that it linked, which is cool. Somebody had mentioned this to me after I'd done the symbolism. She says, "Oh, I was meditating on this anti-Karana symbol." And I was like, oh, I didn't know what that was, but I thought it was interesting that it was a cube, because the cube goes back to the tesseract, and the dimensional, has like a small cube inside, and it moves in and out. It's kind of like a wormhole, right? It goes back to the tesseract, that Oprah Winfrey movie was that she was in. So now we see that it's to do with this Operation Warp Speed that this channel did. Now he's freaking out because he's like, now Trump is satanic, because he thinks this is all satanic. And I'm kind of like, oh my God, that's really sad, because it's to do with your chakras. And it's to do with, I like the way the terminology of the word is anti-karana. It's like anti-corona, okay? But it teaches you can use this symbol and meditate on it to heal, okay? So it's like to do with Reiki healing. So it's actually a healing tool. There's nothing satanic about it. except that if you believe anything that's not your religion that you worship is satanic. Like, let's have open minds and look at all religions equally and just kind of understand the symbols is what I'm trying to do, and not put judgment on anything. Clean slate. So the symbol has to do with balancing physical brain and your higher self, the connection that must heal and develop if we are to grow spiritually. The Aka Karana symbol depicted and described here represents the connection which activates it whenever you are in its presence. The science of the wait a second, I can't read this. Radionics indicates that the lines drawn on a paper create a psychic effect on the space surrounding the drawing and will influence the human aura and chakras in various ways depending on the pattern created. Okay, so it's like you want this pattern around you, so supposedly it helps heal you. So it's like a healing symbol, and I think this is pretty cool that Trump put this on his warp speed, which has to do with warp speed is like, what is that? Jumping timelines. And when he said that warp speed, I was like, what the heck? But I never really understood the symbol because I didn't know this symbol. Okay, so here it says it's most effective in fighting any illness. Any object or anything placed between them, the symbols will be cleared of negative energy. Male and female antakarana symbols neutralize any kind of energy. Crystals can cleanse by placing them between the two akarana symbols. Place akarana symbols under your bed, mattress, or to promote better sleep. Place akarana symbols on chakras to balance chakras. Charge your food and water to purify by placing it on an akarana. It acts as a detoxifier. Place near electronic gadgets to reduce the EMF effect. So there you go. It's like a magical symbol. And it's so funny that it's like anti-karana. It's like anti-corona. I find that funny, really funny. So here's the male and female version of them. Kind of like just turned. Okay, so this video has actually come out to be an hour and 10 minutes, so I think I'm going to cut it off here in two parts because I think when the videos get too long, it just gets like, overwhelming to try to retain all the information. I can't even retain it all, it's like I'm almost like, oh my God, what did I talk about? It's like, it's just so much information. So anyhow, I'm going to cut it off here and I'll do this video in two parts. I'm not going to post my astrology reading because I'm getting kind of like banished from Discord rooms because I have a PayPal link to it. So if you want to get to my website, just go back a few videos. They're all on the other videos. So just so I can post this stuff in the rooms and help people see some of this information. Pulling up the Medusa clock at night.